Namaskar. My name is Manish Kumar and I welcome all of you to my channel. So we are going to talk about XCOM today, and I can teach XCOM very clearly in 10 minutes, but I want to teach you why things are working behind the scene, what all things are going, and that is why this lecture can be a little lengthy, but trust me, it is going to be worth it. So without further delay, we will go to the laptop screen and discuss everything in detail. Alright, so I am at laptop screen now and we are going to talk about XCOM today. So what does this XCOM mean? So X means basically we can call it cross also, right? And COM is for communication. So together it makes cross communication, and this is what XCOM means. So now we are going to discuss first about potential interview question, and then we will see everything in detail, and then this question will get answered as usual. Okay, so first thing is, what is XCOM? Most of the time interviewer won't ask this question, they will ask this one: how do you pass data between two tasks, or data between two DAGs? So that is where XCOM is used. Basically cross communication is happening. Why and when do we use XCOM in your pipeline? So here you will have to explain your real scenario where you are utilizing XCOM in your pipeline. Where do you store XCOM data? Right, so there is a concept of XCOM backend which can be built, but so that question can come, right? What is the default size of XCOM? Again, there is some limitation of XCOM which also we'll talk about. And then XCOM serialization and deserialization, this is one of the advanced topic that they may or may not go into. Okay, so these are the things that we are going to discuss in today's video. So before going there are few concepts which we have already discussed, but I don't know you might remember or not. So if you don't remember those things, you are not doing justice with yourself. Okay, and if you do, then you are already doing good. Okay, so the first thing is context. Do you need context? What is context? What all values inside context? Because I have explained it very clearly. Do you remember task instance, right? Task instance. Then the third would be DAG ID. Mostly DAG ID you would be remember. Then the fourth thing is metadata database, and last, worker execution flow. Worker execution flow. So if you don't remember all of these things, you are not listening to the lecture carefully, or you are not very serious about what we are doing, because these are the building blocks of Airflow that we have discussed till now, right? So for the context, I'm going to showcase again what all things are there, and then task instance, DAG ID slash DAG run, I would say, right? And then metadata database, and the last, worker execution flow. This one we were talking about when we were talking about architecture. In that lecture we have discussed this thing in very detail, but again I will just give you a glimpse. But you should be very familiar with all these concepts. If you are not, then be serious about these lectures. Okay, and be serious about your life, because if you are appearing for interview, or if you are building something, you should be very concrete with these concepts. Okay, so yeah, I'll go and I'll showcase you. So I'll go through these concepts in very brief and explain everything in a minute or two. Okay, so here I think somewhere I had stored the context. Yeah, this is the context that I just print again, and I have just make it a little bit pretty here, right? I'll just make it zoom. Yeah, so you can see here, this is a dictionary. Inside dictionary we have a key like DAG, inlet, outlet, map index. Already we have talked about these things. Here see, there is a task instance, and inside the task instance, that task instance is basically a object of runtime task instance, and this is what the value is inside this task instance. So if you see, ID is there, task ID is there, DAG ID is there, run ID is there, and these are the three things that would be required to understand XCOM very clearly. Okay, and these are the three things that we use to identify XCOM values, right? And then there are few things that is here, like start time, end time, and everything. Then here if you see again, task instance is there and ti is there. So initially we were using ti, now they have changed it to task instance, but to make it backward compatible, because if someone is writing ti, then that should also get supported. So if you see, task instance and ti has the exact same value, it's just that for backward compatibility they have kept it. And remaining things you already know, diagram, right? Again I talked about diagram, right? Inside diagram what all things are there, how logical dates, how data interval start and end date is used in real time when we were doing incremental loading, right? So all of these things I have already taught. So now you remember these things, what is required today in today's video. So now we have discussed about context, task instance, everything was there in that diag id. Now metadata db, you might remember that we are using Postgres as a metadata DB, right? And where this Postgres was mentioned, when we were downloading through the Docker. So when we were doing all the setup inside the Docker compose file, we had written that I will use Postgres as my metadata database, right? And then worker execution flow. So before going there, I'll just tell you about this. Here we had connected, right? This one, if I run this, you can see here these are the values like dag id and then version and everything that we already discussed about serialized dag in one of the lecture. In today's lecture we are going to see about xcom, how xcom data is getting stored inside the metadata database. And then the last is worker execution flow. So if you see here, this was the worker execution flow that we discussed during the architecture video, and you can clearly see that task runner is here, and task runner is writing data into result backend, and then that result backend scheduler is pushing the data into Postgres database, right? So you might remember that worker or a task does not directly communicate with the Postgres or any backend database, right? This was clearly mentioned in one of the like in the architecture video. And you can, I had given I think high level diagram as well, right? This is the high level architecture diagram where you can see that worker is on client side and database is on the server side, right? So this two does not have a direct communication, and this is what we are going to see in our code base, how these things have been implemented in Airflow 3.0 through in the xcom dag also, because xcom is running inside the worker, basically task is running inside the worker, and that is basically pushing the data into database. So that is where we'll come to the lecture again and understand more about xcom. So now we will understand about our architecture, where we already know that we have 3 tasks, right? And all basically 3 APIs are there, and those 3 API will be basically converted into 3 different tasks. So you have a user login, you have a product page, you have a checkout page. Each of these DAGs write the data into one of the folder, or in it can be the case that it is writing in a different folder, right? So here it is writing, so let's say this is writing in folder 1, this is writing in folder 2, and this is writing in folder 3, and all of this data is being read by this read raw task. This is again one of the tasks that we have defined in earlier lecture, right? Till now we are good, right? User whatever we are pulling the data from API in the user login page, we are putting it into folder 1, this is getting pushed into folder 2, and this is getting pushed into folder 3. But it can be the case that every time this is getting written into a different folder, right? Or it can be like if we are writing monthly folder, so again as month changes or as year changes, there will be a different folder created for that particular run, right? So how will I come to know in read raw that okay, this value has been written in at what place? So that is where we are going to use xcom. So how these things will work? See, this user login is writing today in folder 1, but it can be the case that it someday it will be written in the folder 101, 102, 103, something like this. There is no hard coded folder path right now, right? So in that case, every time there will be a different number. Then how will read raw method come to know that which folder the data has been written by the previous task? That is where we would use xcom. So what xcom says, that okay, you are writing this information in folder 1, folder 2 and folder 3. So do one thing, whenever you are writing, put it this data, right, whatever this information, these two or these three information are there, put it into the database, right? And for us the database is postgres, so it is putting into db, right? And this db is postgres for us, at least in this case. So now these three tasks push the data into db, and now redraw says, okay, whatever you are pushing into db, I will just pull it from there, right? And I'll run the next task like redraw, and then further communication will be done. And this is what xcom does, right? So whatever data we are pushing, right, this all are push mechanism, right? That we are pushing data into database, and here we are pulling the data, so this will be a pull mechanism. So this is what xcom means. Xcom has two things. Xcom is basically in a task, xcom is getting used, and this xcom has two things to do. Either it will push the data or it will pull the data. And from where this is pushing, like where this data is getting pushed, into the db, and db is configured for us is postgres, right? Till now everything should get cleared, right? So this is what xcom means. Now xcom has some limitations, so we'll talk about xcom limitations, and then we will further do like we will write our code. We'll write the code in the notebook itself, and we will replicate the same on the ui, and same on the VS code, and everything will work as smoothly as it can. And if you can do on the paper, like if you take a notes and everything, you will be very, like you will not have a single difficulty. It will be piece of cake to write xcom push and pull, although it's a simple only. But yeah, so here I came to xcom limitations. What all limitations xcom has? It has the good things, but it has some limitations. First thing, it is used, okay, it is used for writing metadata information. We are not writing the data, right? Writing metadata info. And if you are writing the data, then that's not a good approach, and that's not how we should use xcom, at least, right? So writing the metadata info means I'm not writing the data itself, right? That I wrote 1 lakh records today. I'm just telling, okay, I wrote the data in folder 1 or folder 2 or folder 3, or someday on folder 101, 102 or 103. So I'm just telling where did I write the data. I'm not telling this is the data, right? So, and this is kind of a limitations, or this is how we have to use. Then xcom, in xcom, each backend, right? Each backend. So for now it's a postgres, right? Postgres backend, I would say. Postgres backend. So for each backend, there is a limit of how much memory or how much data you can write. So I think Postgres, it's in MB. There is like in interview they are not going to ask you exact number, but yeah, there are something which you can Google also. SQLite has some GB, so you can store the data in GB. Metadata information till GB. So if you have data and you are writing it into a GB, it will still store, but that's not a good approach. And that is where this Postgres backend comes into the picture. But you can consider, right? Some of the backend will just let you store in KB, some of the backend will let you store in MB, some of the store will let you store in GBs of information, right? Okay, now, so this Postgres backend, now not Postgres backend, I would say XCOM backend. So there is a provision that if you want to create a different backend than the Postgres, which is metadata database for us right now, you can create one. Mostly if you need these are written by DevOps team, not by a developer team who will create the backend for you to store the XCOM data. Okay. It can be S3, it can be GCS, it can be Postgres for us right now, it can be SQLite, anything. And all these things can be handled through Docker, right? So in Docker, there are configuration which you will have to go to the documentation and find out the variable name. Those variable name, by changing those variable name, you can change the XCOM backend location. For us right now, it's a Postgres. Okay. So these are the few things that I wanted to talk. Now you understand, we in one task we are pushing the data, in another task we are just pulling the data. Now see what we are doing. We have 3 APIs. So I'll take just example for one. Let's say product page, right? So I have a product page, and from this product page I want to push the data, right? So I have a product page and I want to push the data. So to push the data, what we are going to do, we are going to use Python operator, right? Generally what we do, Python operator we use. So here also I'm using Python operator, and in Python operator there will be a Python call level, right? And I'm not writing here, so I'll just put Python call level. I'm not writing here the DAG ID and task ID and then OP keyword arguments or OP arguments, but I'm just focusing on Python call level right now because this is where I'm interested in, right? So Python call level is again some product call, right? So this kind of function name is there. Inside this function name, this is where actually we are doing everything, right? Inside the Python call level. So what I'll do, I'll create a function with product call, because first we want to push the data and then we will pull the data here, right? And I'm not pushing every other variable apart from the context, right? So this is always there for us, a star star keyword args or a star star context, which is this is what I printed, and I showcase all the value which is there inside the context, and this is where those context value will be handy now. So now in product call, what I'm going to do, this is a context. So entire context is there, right? So I can write task instance equal to context, and context is a dictionary. So from dictionary, if you want to pull out any key, right? So this is how with the square bracket and dot get method, we pull the data, right? So now TI is the task instance we have now, right? And this is what we use, TI dot, if we have to push the data, then I'll write xcom underscore push, right? And when we are pushing the data, there are two things that we pass. One is key and another one is value. So what will be the key and what will be the value of that? So here, if you don't pass the key, right? Key is hard coded value right now in our code base that I'll also showcase to you. So if you don't pass the key name will be return value, okay? And value will be value. So if I want to push the actual data, so I'll write something like this, ti dot xcom push, and when pushing the data, I'll give the name key, and key equal to, I'll say, let's say output path, right? And the value, the next thing I have to push is value, and value equal to, let's say I want to push slash airflow, right? Slash test dot csv, something like this I want to push, right? So this is how, this is it, right? We push the data in xcom through this xcom push, and xcom push internally will handle all the things that has to be pushed to database. And how this is going to get done, it will basically, this is a task instance which is running inside a task runner which is there in worker execution flow, and then that will push into xcom backend, that will push into result backend, and result backend will again through a scheduler, it will get pulled and it will be stored into the database, right? So this is what the actual flow is happening. The same way now, right, I'll write another method which will pull the data, right? So read raw method was there to pull the data. So I'll just write read raw. Again, every time I will have a context available to us when we are running any task, right? Again, I'll write the same thing, ti equal to context of ti, right? And now this time I have ti dot xcom underscore pull. When I am pulling the data, now understand here clearly, when we are pulling the data, right? What all things we need? You think, right? The first thing that will be required is key. Without key, how will we pull the data, right? Okay, you have the key. Will you be able to pull the information that you are looking for? Yes, with the key itself, I can pull the data. But now, how will I come to know? I have 3 tasks running, or maybe I have 100 of tasks running. I want to pull the data. I have the key, but from which task? For us, at least right now, we have product, we have user, we have checkout, right? So how will my read raw method will come to know? Okay, from which task I have to pull, right? So key and task ID are 2 things which will be required, right? These are the 2 things that will be required. Apart from this, we have few more options, and the option is DAG ID. So now here you can pass a DAG ID which is a different DAG in itself, right? So I was running this DAG, maybe this was the incremental pipeline DAG was running, but I am pulling the data from maybe something else, and that is totally fine because I have option to pull from DAG ID. Although this is not a recommended approach, but there is an option that I can pull any data which is available in XCOM from the key, task ID and DAG name. And also we have option for providing run ID. Those things also I'll showcase to you, but the important thing is key and task ID. So here if I have to write the code, actual code, then how will I write? XCOM underscore pull, and what is the key name now? We just now push the data with the key name as output path. So here I will write output underscore path. This way I am asking to give me specifically output path, but from which task? Maybe I am writing the output path in each case, user case, login case, checkout case, but this time I want it from the product one, right? So I'll give the name task. What is the task? I think I did not give the task name here, so I'll just write product page. I'm considering your variable name and task name is same, so I'm just passing here product page. So this is how we are pulling the data. Now I don't think you have any you should have any confusion that how these things are getting pulled. Although this is pretty easy, right? I would have said okay, XCOM is there, XCOM push and pull, and you are done, right? But now this is the main thing, that we are going to see the actual code base which is there, which is this, how this has been written, and everything should be crystal clear by now. And also the data which will be pushed into the metadatabase, that we are going to see also in this video. Okay, so now the time has come to write the code, make our hand a little bit dirty. And this is where I remember one thing: the code which I am writing, I'm not going to give you this code to you guys. You will have to write your own code. I mean, it's a pretty simple code. Whenever required, I will give you the code base, but 99% of the cases or 99% of the DAG, you are not going to see any code base available in my GitHub, because this is, I'm here to teach you, and my way of teaching is pretty different than other creators or other educators, I would say, right? So now I'll create one file here inside the DAG folder. Again, you are not going to get this code base, you will have to write your own. Okay, a underscore xcom dag.py. I always give this a underscore just to, because I am shooting the 2 videos, one in Hindi and another in English, and the English one you are watching right now, so already Hindi video is short. Okay, so this is where the real engineer things kicks in. Okay, now we are going to see internally why things are working. Things are working, things will work, but why this will work, that we are going to see. Then the first thing is from airflow.sdk. If you are using airflow 3, please use airflow.sdk wherever you can, because everything has been wrapped inside airflow SDK. If you are not using, then you can see a different behavior. Okay, so I'm pulling this xcom library from here, and if you go to this xcom code base, what you are going to see here is this class, base xcom class. So I was saying you can build your own custom backend, and if you write your own custom backend, you will have to extend your functionality from this base xcom, because this in this base xcom class there are two methods which has been written. Is one is serialize, another one is deserialize. So if you want to serialize or deserialize your own custom objects, so in that case you would need your own serializer. Okay, so I'll again talk about this base xcom. We are going to see in a moment about serialization and deserialization inside this class itself. So here it will set some of the value, right? DAG ID, key, value and task. And if you go here, see the value which you are getting, it will get serialized. And inside this serialized value, if I come here, you can see this class is this airflow.serialization deserialization method library is getting called. So I'll go inside this serialize, and if you see here, everything is written crystal clear. Okay, see, if O is none, so basically you are not passing anything. If the value which you passed is of primitive data type is basically array, string, integer, float, boolean, right? If you are passing those values as a list, if you are passing those as a dictionary, so all these things will get serialized. Otherwise you are going to see the error. And I think there are few more serialization options we have, like data classes, that also is that is also there. So if you are passing any objects related to this, then it will get serialized, else you are going to get the error about serialization, and in that case you will have to write your own serialization, and mostly that is done by DevOps team. So we are not going to see further inside this. So this is how serialization is happening, and again there will be a deserialization somewhere there. Okay, now see here, we got the value, we have the xcom, I wrote the xcom push. So now here if you see supervisor communication dot send, so this is where we are pushing the data into database, right? So if I go inside this send method, right, send method, if you see here, nothing is happening, it is just getting response, but the main logic has been written inside this supervisor communication. So now we are directly not communicating with the database. This is what I was saying when I was explaining about the worker execution flow. Supervisor communication will send all the message or all the xcom value that we are sending it. So here setting the xcom and then sending the value through supervisor xcom, and if you go to the supervisor xcom, it has its own world. I'm not going to explain again further inside how things are happening inside supervisor communication, but you understand here that supervisor communication is there, serialized value is there, everything is written inside this base xcom class, right? Now I'll come to our code base again, and see here the another thing I have written is runtime task instance. So what is happening there inside this itself? So end of the day base xcom class will get called, but who is sending those values, right? If you see the base xcom class that we were just where was that, when we were seeing this xcom class, right, where these values are coming from, right? So this is coming from the task runner, right? I'll go again inside this task time instance, and this is where we are sending all those values, and those values are getting sent to supervisor communication and supervisor communicator communication, and that is basically sending the data to database. Okay, so basically we should see, we wrote ti.xcom push. So ti is basically task instance, and task instance is running inside a task runner, right? So we are here now. You'll see xcom push and xcom pull. See xcom pull This is one of the method that is implemented inside the run task instance, and another one is xcom push. So first we will push the data, then we'll pull, right? So I'm going inside this xcom push, and xcom push takes two value, keys and value, and this is what we were passing, right? And then internally this calls xcom push, and xcom push has already runtime task instance, key, value, map length, all these values are there, and here it will call xcom dot set, right? It will set the value, and boom, we are here at base xcom, right? This is what I was saying. So now you understand base xcom and where this call is coming from, xcom push. So this is as simple as that. We just have to go one directory inside and we'll see everything crystal clear. Okay, the same way I'll go for xcom pull, right? So this is xcom pull. xcom pull takes multiple things, and this is what I was talking about. It will take task ID because you are sending from multiple tasks. Then how will I come to know? Maybe you want the task, you want the value from different tag. Okay, you pass it, I'll give you, right? Then key, if you're not passing the key, I'll consider return underscore value as a key, and this is what I told you, right? So everything is written inside this. We just have to scan through the code base. And now again, if I go here xcom.get1, right? This is basically, this is where it is going to pull the data, and if this is pulling, boom, again we are at base xcom class. Get1 is basically a class which will pull the data, and to pull the data, who is going to be responsible? Supervisor communicator. Supervisor communicator will send to get the xcom values, and you are going to get the data. So this is how your xcom is working. Now you understand everything from the depth, that why xcom is there, how things are working internally, right? We are not done it, we are still some things to show, right? Now here the task instance, actually I got confused, right? Last time when I was going through the code base, I by mistake pulled this one, and now I was thinking, how come airflow 3 has architecture, like it says in the documentation that architecture has been changed. Then I made this mistake, I imported from airflow.models. That is why I'll again remind you to use airflow.stk, otherwise you are going to see a different behavior. And if you import this kind of things, then of course you are going to see a different behavior, because if I go inside this task instance, here again there will be xcom push and pull, because this is what we are doing, right? So here also I'm see, xcom push is there, and here it is setting the value, and inside this xcom model instance serialize, see here session.execute. So it was executing directly the values which we have passed. So if we are passing key and value, this will basically directly execute, and your data will get stored. So I was just confused. If you see here, this session is also getting passed. So this is how earlier task was able to write data directly into database, but now that segregation has been done. So those things that I made a mistake, you don't have to, and I have given you some warnings that what all mistake you don't have to do, right? So now you understand xcom from the depth of airflow, right? So now we are going to just replicate the same code which we discussed earlier. So if you see here, this is the import statement from airflow. I'm importing Python operator. I just copied from somewhere, right? So these are the DAG object creation, and here if you see product page is there, I'm using Python operator. DAG and task IDs are required arguments, and then Python callable. Inside Python callable, if I go here, I can see I'm using context. From context task instance I'm bringing, and then I'm pushing output path and then some values, right? Again I'll remove this, and again if I go here, the second task, which is redraw, again here redraw callable is there, and it is pulling the data through key and task ID, right? This is the key which I just provided here, and task ID is the task name which I gave here, right? So this is how I am going to pull this data. And now I'll just rename this tag to this, right? And I think everything should work. Now it's time to test it. And there are few things I would like to talk about which is still pending, right? So I'll go to localhost 8080. I can see import error. Okay, these are import error, not from ours. Okay, so I think we are good. I'll go here and see xcom dag. See a underscore xcom dag, right? We wrote this dag which will run every 2 minutes. I'll go to the code and I can see everything is here, right? So I'll just start this. So we'll see some of the not some of the, just one dag. It will start whenever we will unpause the dag. And here if I go to the product page, because this is where I push the data, right? So I can see here push xcom with key as output path and value as this. Basically this is the print statement that we did, right? And for the second task I can see here I'm pulling the data and I'm not hard coding it, right? So if you see pulled xcom key with output path, and where is the value? Did I print the value? Okay, I think I did not print the value, or did I? Pulled xcom with key output path and output path. Okay, I did print, right? So this is coming none, right? I think we made a mistake then, because if I'm pushing here, right, output path and value, then why this value is not pulled, right? So here I can see xcom output path, and here no xcom found. Okay, I'll re-trigger it. I'm not sure what is going wrong here. Okay, so this was a classic issue. If I go here in the product page, graph view, I can see these two tasks are running in parallel. So maybe redraw ran like these two were running parallel, so it did not had any value and it did not pull anything, right? So basically there is no dependency between these two tasks. First should push and then second should pull, but here both are running in parallel. So that was the confusion which due to which we were not able to see the exact way or exact value which we were expecting, right? So what I'll do, I'll go here and I'll just set the dependency that product raw page should run first and then read raw should run. Now I saved it. I'll go again here and I'll just refresh the page and I should see there a different version, right? This is the second version where we set the dependency. Now see, at last we are having dependency. I'll run this dag again, and this time hopefully we should have the expected value now, right? So here I'm in this diagram and I'll click on read raw, and here it says pulled xcom with key output path, and this is the value, right? This is what we ran the print statement, right? Now everything is good. We'll go to browse and we can see the xcom value which we pushed. Although we can see it from there also, we can see it from here also. So now here if you see, this is the dag, but we have an option for filter, and in this filter you can select anything. So I am going to pull from dag id. So what is the dag id name? A underscore xcom dag, right? So if you see here, we are pushing data axcom dag, and then task id map index. Basically this is not a dynamic task mapping, so map index is -1 timestamp, and this is the value, and of course this was the key. If I'm not passing any key name, then see the value was return value in some other tag, right? And we can see the same inside our database as well, postgres database, which is a backend for us. So if I'll run select star from xcom is the table name. If you go here inside database, airflow, schema, public, tables, you can see all the tables are here and there is a xcom table. If I run this, right, I should see the same result. See, like of course there is a different value. So what I'll do, I'll write a where dag id, right? We have a dag id equal to a underscore xcom underscore dag. This was my dag name. I'll run this query and yeah. So if you see here, I can see dag run id, task id, map index, output path, right? dag id, run id. So now that is what I was saying, that you can bring any value which has been pushed into any kind of dag from here, and this is where all the your UI is getting powered, right? This everything is coming from the backend. So this is how xcom you can use. Although using xcom is pretty easy, but why things are working inside and how things are working inside, that was the real thing that as a engineer we should think about, right? So we are done with today's lecture and we will meet in the next video. Till then, bye bye.